Hello everyone, welcome back for another video in our online community. Last time we talked about various tips to work with anxiety in the time of coronavirus. And based on questions that came in, as well as our monthly social recently, the end of March, I am happy to follow up on a topic that seems of importance to all of you, which is that of compassion in the time of coronavirus. Cool. I'm glad that we maybe have this opportunity, that we've settled into this weird version of the world that we are currently in, and we're working with the anxiety. Anxiety, got it. Looking at it, being with it, seeing through it. Cool. What about compassion? It's a great question. I appreciate y'all asking it. So I want to start by reading something from the Vietnamese Zen master and Nobel Peace Prize recipient Thich Nhat Hanh. And he said, "In Buddhism, we learn that understanding is the very foundation of love. If understanding is not there, no matter how hard you try, you cannot love. If you say, 'I have to try to love that person,' this is nonsense. You have to understand them, and by doing so, you will love them. One of the things I've learned from the teaching of the Buddha is that without understanding, love is not possible. If a husband and wife do not understand each other, they cannot love each other. If a parent and child do not understand each other, they will make each other suffer. So understanding is the key that unlocks the door to love. Understanding is the process of looking deeply. Meditation means to look deeply at things, to touch things deeply. A wave has to realize that there are other waves around her. Each wave has her own suffering. You are not the only person who suffers. Your sisters and your brothers also suffer. The moment you see suffering in them, you stop blaming them and you stop the suffering in you. If you suffer, and if you believe that your suffering is created by the people around you, you have to look again. Most of your suffering comes from the lack of understanding of yourself and others." So there's a few parts here that I want to break out before I even get into what I was planning to speak about. One would be that when we talk about Buddhism and love, we're not necessarily talking about, oh, I love my child, and there's a great attachment to that child, and they're mine, and I get to do what I want with them, or I love my spouse, and only because they do certain things for me. But there's something boundless about love. In fact, the way that love is often talked about is through the teachings of the Four Measurables. The Four Measurables are four ways that we might actually contact the innate open heart that we have. In Sanskrit, this word would be bodhicitta, bodhi being open or awake, citta being heart or mind. So an open or awake heart that we all possess. And when we get out of our own way, when we let go, for example, the anxiety that we might feel, or the stories of what if this happens, what if that happens, we might be able to touch that open-heartedness. And when love starts to flow, it flows out in an immeasurable, boundless way. So the Four Measurables: loving kindness. This is a good time for us to be doing loving kindness, and we have loving kindness meditation in actually two in our guided recordings folder. And the second is compassion, which is what we're talking about today. Compassion is the notion that when we see the suffering of others, that we're open and available, we understand it, we suffer together. That sense that Thich Nhat Hanh here is saying is that the wave that realizes that there are other waves around her. Each wave has their own suffering. We're not the only one. Particularly during this time, we realize, oh, it's not just me that's suffering because of job insecurity or isolation and quarantine, or fear of our loved ones getting ill, or whatever it is. It's like, oh, that's a lot of people right now. Many, 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 many people are also in this situation. So we are not the only person who suffers. Our sister and brothers also suffer. 3, sympathetic joy. Right before I sat down with you all, I was teaching a class on Journey Live, and there was someone who in quarantine was celebrating her daughter's 20th birthday. And I had this all of a sudden, this yearning for cake. And I noticed it. I said, "Are you having cake?" And they said, "We are having cake." And that yearning all of a sudden became sympathetic joy. I was able to say, oh, well, setting aside my desire, I'm so glad that they get to enjoy cake together. In the midst of all this, what a wonderful and simple treat. And I rejoiced in the joy of another person. So that's not a form of offering love in the Buddhist tradition. And the fourth would be equanimity. Equanimity is not some sense of I'm always grounded and no matter what happens. Now, for people who have studied this particular set, the four teachings, the four measurables with me before, you know that I'm fond of two aspects here. One, the dictionary definition of equanimity, excuse me, which is to remain calm and composed in the midst of difficult circumstances. So it's not everything's going my way. It's there's a shitstorm happening right now, and I'm still able to remain grounded and rooted. That's equanimity. How does that manifest as love? Well, not surprisingly, when we have freaked out family members calling us and saying, oh my God, what's going on there? If we're grounded, and we're rooted in the midst of the difficult circumstances, we're more open and available for them. We don't get uprooted. We don't start freaking out and say, I don't know. We say, oh, yeah, here's what's going on. And there's a sense of almost being even keeled, and because we're rooted, we're more open and available in connecting to others. Now, the second aspect I want to mention here is that of, Thich Nhat Hanh actually has a great translation of this Sanskrit word upeksha, which is commonly translated as equanimity. He translates it, though, as inclusiveness. The idea that we can be inclusive of everyone in our heart. That is not the people I like, and definitely not the people I don't like. It's everyone. Everyone gets included in the heart. And we can offer a sense of open-heartedness to everyone we encounter. So the idea here is, how do we access that? How do we access a sense of compassion? The short answer, according to Thich Nhat Hanh, is understanding. Understanding is the very foundation of love. It's the very before we even move to compassion or sympathetic joy, we seek to understand. In the same way, it's a bizarre example, I apologize, but I'm saying, okay, this person's celebrating their 20th birthday of their daughter in quarantine. What would that be like? And I'm seeking to understand what would that look like. And I said, I wonder if they're going to have cake. And I said, do you have cake? And he said, yes. I said, that's my access point. I love cake. I get it. I bet you can have a really nice time. And all of a sudden, there's just a sense of open-heartedness. So we almost have to look for our little inroads for people, particularly people we have a hard time with. But if we don't know people very well, it's what's my inroad, so that I might be able to seek to understand them. And by understanding them, is that the moment that I can actually open my heart and make a solid connection of compassion, sympathetic joy, etc. If understanding is not there, no matter how hard we try, we cannot love. So I think this is the foundation for our work together today, the idea of understanding. Understanding is the key that unlocks the door to love. That's what he said. He knows a lot. He's very smart. I should say he's very wise. So the foundation for our work today is seeking to understand other people. That's what I really want to focus on. Because a lot of times what we do is we divide the world up into, I like you, I don't like you, I'm ignoring you. One of my go-to stories for this is actually back when I was living in New York and I was working a great deal, and my wife was as well, and we said, okay, you know what, let's meet for a glass of wine at this local bar near where we live. And we got there in time, we were able to get seats at the bar, and we sat down, and all of a sudden I was like, all right, I'm in, I'm here, I'm with this person, I like this person, I want to be with them. And then literally the bar stool right behind me, there was someone there, and they were with a friend, and they were laughing, and they had the most obnoxious laugh. I still can hear it in my head to this day. And in that moment, I was like, when is this person leaving? I look over my shoulder, okay, they still have their full glasses, okay. And it's the sense of I do not like this. And I realized in that moment I was doing the thing. This view of my world, I like this person, I don't like that person, and then I was actively ignoring the other 40, 50 people in the bar, right? So we're always doing I like, I dislike, I'm actively ignoring. That's the way that we view the world. If I, pointed at this print, where is it? There we go. Doing the mirror thing in the camera. If I point at this print, what do you think? You say, oh, is that an MC Escher? I like MC Escher. Or you say, oh, no, his work just boggles my mind. I don't like looking at it. Or you say, I didn't even notice that there was a print over there. I've been watching these videos for a while now, and I haven't even seen that, So there's always some sense of I like, I dislike, I ignore. It's always happening. So let's talk about that. Let's break it out in terms of how do we actually start to manifest compassion during this time for these beings. There's the people we like, And we should reach out to them. We should try to find ways that we can actually show up for the people that we really do care about. For me, I'm not going to, I don't even know where my phone is, but if I had it, I would show it to you in my calendar. Every Tuesday, there's a little note that says, reach out to friends. Or it says, send nice things to friends, actually, is the specific language, if I'm being technical. And it's this notion of like, oh, can we even like schedule time and say, I'm going to reach out to people who I may not normally be in constant touch with, or, they, aren't very good at reaching out, so I should probably reach out to them because I'm thinking of them and I want them to know that they're supported. And that might just be even just a text message or a quick call, a voicemail, something that says, hey, I'm thinking of you. How are you in the midst of this? That means so much to people. That's a form of compassion. That we're sort of like implying, like, hey, I see that you might be suffering. There are many people right now who are. How are you doing in the midst of that? Can I be here for you? Can I hold space for you? Would you like to talk? If we're the technical sort of person, we might even be like, oh, I should have a list of all those people, that I ought to reach out to and all of that. If you want to get technical, you could, but I think it's more intuitive of like, who's been on your mind lately? And can you extend yourself, maybe even beyond your comfort zone, to reach out and have that connection, to let them know that you're there for them? A different Thich Nhat Hanh quote, he said, never in human history have we had so many means of communication: television, radio, telephone, fax, email, the internet, yet we remain islands with very little real communication between us. So the goal here isn't just to like copy and paste a text message to 25 contacts and say, how are you? But to actually form real connection, real, actually like open-hearted connection to these beings in whatever way makes sense to you. I don't know if people watched this show maybe about a year or so ago. There's a show on Netflix called Russian Doll, which was quite delightful. And in it, there's a character who is contemplating suicide. They're up on a roof and they're thinking about jumping. And our protagonist comes out and says, please don't do that. I don't want you to do that. And the potential jumper looks at her and goes, promise me I'll be happy. And she says, very astutely, I can't promise you that. I can promise you won't be alone. It's pretty effing Buddhist, if you ask me. Make sure that, can you tell me I'm going to be okay? Can you tell me I'm going to be happy? I can't reassure. I don't know. No one knows anything. But I can promise you, you won't be alone. So this is the offering that we're making of like, maybe people feel alone in how they're feeling right now. Can we be there with them? Even if they're not happy, can we be there with them? That's the form of compassion. I see you're suffering, I'm here with you. We're all in the same boat right now, together to some degree. We might be struggling with fear of whether we will get ill or loved ones will get ill. We might be struggling with isolation or feeling boxed up. We might be dealing with frustration of family members who are on top of each other. We might be feeling overwhelmed by the amount of things that are needing to happen, homeschooling kids on top of our workday and on top of everything else. There's any number of things that we might be feeling. So at the same time, it's really interesting because our particular stories may differ a little bit here and there, but overall, it's not like we're dealing with dramatically different things than everyone else. It's like, oh, we're all in this together. So when we do loving kindness practice, for example, when we bring our loved one to mind, this person we care about, we have this opportunity where we say, oh, may you be happy. And the thought might arise, what would it take for you to be happy? Would it be cake for your daughter's birthday? Would it be feeling like you landed that client so that you aren't freaked out about money? Right? And we just sort of acknowledge that sense of, what would it take? And then we move into the next phrase. If those questions don't arise, that's okay. But at some point they might. At some point, the mind naturally kicks into the drive of seeking to understand that person and what they're going through. What would it mean for them to be happy? What would it mean for them to feel safe? Is that financial safety? What is it? And that's us seeking to understand. And that's the doorway to compassion for these people that we cherish. Let's talk about the people we don't know. So we talked about, I like this. We'll talk about the I don't like this. And right now we're in the I don't know you. There's so many people that we don't know that are being affected by this time. I work with a lot of people from around the world, so I actually get to sort of have these little glimpses of what's your experience in Italy? What's your experience of this in Spain? What's your experience of this in Hong Kong? And it's been really interesting because we might not normally be able to have access points to what is it like over there. We only know our own situation or our loved one's situation. There's a moment recently where the governor here in New York, Cuomo, made a point that he was sort of talking about the numbers, and there's a lot of numbers being thrown out. This many people have died, this many people are infected, this many people are at home, these many people are at risk, or whatever it might be. And he said, these are not numbers, these are people. Which is the most direct way of putting what I'm trying to get across here. That it's easy to get lost in the numbers, but there's people behind it. There's actual human beings that we can contemplate. We are living in a somewhat devastating time, and it could be easy to get overwhelmed by those numbers. But if this virus occurred 20 years ago, for example, we would be reading about it the next day in the paper. It would almost feel removed, like, oh, that's something that's happening over there, until it landed on our doorstep. But today, with the internet and all sorts of things, each moment that something happens, there's something new. There's, people get lost staring at Twitter all day with whatever new update might be there. Instead of getting lost in the data points, it might be helpful to contemplate individuals that we see along the way. A story of a doctor who is on the front lines. I work with one-on-one a doctor who, trying to make this very anonymous because I don't want to betray any confidentiality, but in his country they are struggling with the virus, like many of us, and they were put in charge of a handful of hotels. And these hotels have been taken over by people who are arriving back in the country, and they need to be either quarantined or screened or whatever. And the whole process is completely understaffed, and it's completely hectic. And all these people are like, why can't I just go home? Or why can't I go back to where I came from? And it's a mess. It's just a mess. And, talking to this person who was feeling a lot of equanimity, actually, a lot of feeling like I'm calm in the midst of all of this, I was really inspired to see it. He said, at some point I asked, what about you? How are you doing in the midst of it? He goes, well, I don't really have enough of the masks and things that I need to actually feel really safe there, but that's pretty low on the list right now in terms of everything that is being asked of me and what I need to get done. And it just broke my heart. It's like this sweet, sweet human who is really putting themselves at risk. And instead of saying, oh, doctors are having a hard time, or nurses are having a hard time, or the cleaning staff at hospitals are having a hard time, it's like, here's a human being that I know. And this is the access point that actually allows me to contemplate all of the other doctors and nurses and cleaning staff and everyone who makes a hospital run, all of it. That's my access point to people I don't know. So we might, again, need to look for access points of understanding so that we can actually get in there and say, aha, these sorts of people who are risking their lives, or these sorts of people who are affected, or these sorts of people who are very ill. We actually get bigger with our understanding based on these little entry points into, what we might know. Even if it's, maybe it's not meeting with someone who we know in this way that I just described, but it could be, a human interest story in a newspaper that instead of saying, let's focus on the numbers, you might want to read a story about a human being and what they're going through. And that might actually give you an access point to really open up to a sense of compassion for them. And then we get into that realm of what does it mean for them to be happy? What would that look like? Even as we're doing the practice, we bring this person to mind. Maybe we don't even know their image, but we see their name in the newspaper. We say, may they be free of fear. That sounds really important. It would be so wonderful if they could be free of fear in the midst of this, that they could feel grounded. Right? There's just some sense of understanding trying to find ways to understand who they are and what they might be going through. Love and kindness really transforms us so that we can raise our gaze and consider the happiness of whoever is then right in front of us. As we're going through our life, we might even have that sense of walking down the street, and in that moment, we see someone out of our corner of our eye and they look like they're having a hard time, and our heart might naturally open to them. We might just say, "May you be happy." As an on-the-spot practice, it could either be a natural sensation like, "Oh, it just arises because I've been doing loving kindness meditation," or it could be, I see that person, I'm actually consciously going to acknowledge them. Walk down the street, there's another person, I'm going to acknowledge them. And we could do loving kindness practice in this way as well as we walk about, just acknowledging the people right in front of us. And then we get into the people that we dislike. Put it off long enough here. When we villainize other people, we write them off, we're harming ourselves and we're harming the world around us. Thich Nhat Hanh talked about this, that sense of blame, that we blame others. It's not helpful. It's just not helpful to harden our hearts in that way. We want to move in the direction of compassion. We have to look at how we other people. So true peace internally, and even for society overall, it's not going to be achieved by closing our heart off to certain types of people or certain politicians and rounding them up and throwing them on an island, never to be seen again. No, right? We know this. True peace would actually come from softening our hearts and including even the difficult people in our lives as part of our compassion practice. The author Brené Brown once said, "People are hard to hate close up." And I always appreciate that. When we start to place blame and hatred or whatever it might be on another person, that there is an element here where we go, wait a second. Let me get close up. Let me seek to understand you. Often when we've gotten to the point of thinking of someone as like an enemy or a jerk, it's because we haven't seen them in depth or in person and been subjected to their presence for a while. It's very easy for us to just tell stories about what they're like because we actually haven't seen them up close. So let's do a quick thought exercise. If you bring to mind someone that you actually think is a complete jerk, maybe not the person who's given you a lot of trauma, but someone who you think is sort of cool, or at least inconsiderate. And let's just think about what their day may be like. Let's seek to understand them here. What do they do when they get up? Are they kind to their spouse? Do they take care of their children? Do they kick their dog, or do they take good care of the dog? We could even continue to mentally follow them around. Do they go to work, for example, would they get frustrated in traffic? Would they tip their barista at the local coffee shop? Do they have projects fall apart at work and frustrations? Do they have anxiety arise along the way? Just even contemplating from the comfort of our own home, like, here's what this person's going through. You might even think as you're doing this, like, oh, I get angry when I'm running late for work. I know that's difficult. And we might think they're just trying to provide for their loved ones, just like me. That moment where we begin to see these points of connection, these glimpses of, oh, they're just like me. That's the moment that our heart begins to soften toward them. So again, we're finding inroads for compassion here. Of course, a less mental exercise would be to actually spend time with them, to almost shadow them and see what their life is like. See that their kid keeps calling them over and over again, and that's why they end up getting frustrated. And maybe you say, oh, that when they act frustrated towards me, it's not about me. It's about them feeling overwhelmed in their own life. That's interesting, right? So, but if we are not able to spend time with them, particularly now, it's helpful to contemplate what their life might be like. What difficulties might they encounter? What situations might throw them for a loop? How might they show up for their loved ones? It's hard to think, even if someone's a jerk to us, they're probably not a jerk to their loved ones, right? Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche once famously said, everyone loves something, even if it's only tortillas. So, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but I imagine everyone would like to think that they're nice to their dog. That's nice. Maybe that's the inroad towards understanding. Othering someone, though, is a fundamentally aggressive act. When we label someone as other, like they're not for me, they're different, they're worth putting blame on, we're saying that we are right, they are definitely wrong at all times, and they do not deserve to be treated as fully human. It's a very aggressive act. So there are 3 tools I want to offer that might help us sort of loosen our hold on that type of thinking. The first, not surprisingly, is mindfulness. The idea that if we're regularly practicing mindfulness meditation, there's that gap that occurs that we notice, oh, there's a thought that comes up, I acknowledge it, I come back. It's just a little gap in our experience that we don't react at all times. We don't chase after every thought. We acknowledge it, we come back. So we're training in the gap. We're training to just rest in the gap. Similarly, if we're mindful with our emotions, we see this person, we might even feel triggered by them. We feel what we feel before we even act on it. There's a gap. We just rest and say, oh, maybe I should just feel what I feel. Maybe I should give this time, some space, so I can seek understanding. Taking advantage of that gap is important. The second is remembering the basic goodness of everyone. So we've talked about basic goodness in the past, the notion that we're a whole, complete good as is, and it's not just you and me. It's everyone. It includes that person that we might want to other or villainize. And it's easy when we write someone off in our hearts to just say, everyone has basic goodness except for that person. You don't know that person. If you knew that person, you would believe me. It's not true. We know that's not true. So actually contemplating like they are basically good too, and they are acting in a confused way. We can hold both. They're basically good, and because they're not in touch with the sense of wakefulness and basic goodness, they are acting out in ways that are causing harm to themselves and others. Which is not giving anyone a hall pass for bad behavior, granted. But we're acknowledging that underneath the thick veil of confusion, fear, and anger that they might be wearing, there's actually someone there who has the same potential for waking up that we do. You could even think of this person as a small child. That might be a helpful exercise for some of us, that we would think, oh, this person, they weren't like this when they were 7 or 8 years old. And even contemplating them as they appeared as a small child might be helpful. And the third aspect would be seeing good qualities in this other person. The idea here is that everyone has redeemable qualities. Your enemy, in that contemplation we did before, your enemy might be romantic with their partner. They might be kind to the homeless. They might spend time volunteering, coaching inner city youth. Who knows? But there's probably something there that is redeemable. That there is kindness and compassion that's shown on their end. So that might be the access point for our understanding. So we're looking directly at this person long enough to acknowledge the totality of their humanity so that we can wake up our own stubborn heart. One of my favorite examples of this is from Representative John Lewis, who, in addition to having served for many, many, many years in government, he also was a civil rights activist, and the work he did is quite inspiring to me. So I'll read a quote from him. He said, "We from time to time would discuss, if you see someone attacking you, beating you, spitting on you, you have to think of that person. Years ago, that person was an innocent child, innocent little baby. And so what happened? Something go wrong? Did the environment? Did someone teach that person to hate, to abuse others? So you try to appeal to the goodness of every human being. And you don't give up. You never give up on anyone." I love that. It'd be so easy for someone who experienced so much harm to harden his heart and just dismiss white people, period, for the pain he experienced. Instead, Representative Lewis is saying, no. These are people, I'm a person, I can find common ground. That willingness to go beyond our hesitation to do so is so inspiring. To realize that those that we consider evil or villains or whatever could benefit from our compassion is a profound moment. That's actually part of the work that we need to do. It transforms the situation from me versus you, so that we can actually relax into a realm where we're all working together, doing the best we can. There's a lot of suffering in the world because of that one notion, that I'm going to break the world up into these things are for me, these things are against me, these things are worth ignoring, and we just play that out on repeat. That creates so much suffering for ourselves, for our relationships, for society overall. There's that important moment in loving kindness practice where we actually bring everyone to mind, including ourselves, our loved one, the person we don't know very well, and this difficult person. And in that moment, it's not dissolving the boundaries. That it's not me versus you, it's us. May we be happy. We all want to be happy. We all want to be healthy and safe. We all want to live with ease. We all want and deserve love. We are all basically good. This perspective of us is so helpful. When we let go of these tendencies to divide the world into little camps of people that we want to work with, those we don't want to work with, we realize we're constantly surrounded by opportunities to work together for the greater good. And that's important. It's important to show up from a place of compassion during this time, because it's not there's someone out there that's just going to go ahead and solve all of our problems for us. It's not how it works. We know that. So in some sense, we are the leaders this world needs. We don't need to go out and do more and be more productive and all that, but we do need to learn how to show up for one another from a place of mindfulness and compassion. So thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to discussing these notions very soon. Take care.